Years and years of hype, so many misunderstood yet noble young adults like myself were met with ecstasy when we discovered the true gem of action horror gameplay, Resident Evil 4. I don't need to drone on about this timeless classic, but I'm gonna anyways. RE4 is no stranger to the channel. I've covered it in the past, but it's still kicking ass all these years later, toppling the genre whenever its name is merely mentioned. Then of course we got Resident Evil 5, another outstanding sequel to the previous, even if it wasn't quite up to par. The fifth game restricted a lot of different mechanics and story elements from before, but also added new ones that didn't really need to be there. In my opinion, it's a very flawed but promising follow-up to the 2005 hit we all grew up loving, and still do today. There were a few creepy moments riddled throughout that I still remember today, so that's gotta count for something, I suppose. Although its plot and abundance of action moments ruin the experience at times, I still love the voice acting for all characters involved. It also had a lot more boss fights than Resident Evil 4, which is something I really liked as a youngblood. I can remember sitting in my room long ago and hearing my cousin mention Resident Evil 7 and how it might turn out in the future. This was of course way before the public saw that release, yet it was the idea of what the plot could be that had us so excited. We've seen Leon Kennedy go to Europe to save the president's daughter on a deadly mission with a rampaging parasitic virus. We've seen Chris Redfield proudly bulked up and fucking angry all the time as he traced an illegal BOW transaction that led to an entire ancient cult in the most destructive parts of Africa. And we got a pretty conclusive ending for Albert Wesker, so where the hell could the series go from there, I wondered. Back and forth, my cousin and I bounced ideas all night and we couldn't quite grasp it. It only took 3 more fucking years after that night to see that Resident Evil 6 had officially been announced with a release date and pre-order bonus. Holy shit. I almost melted into the couch from the excitement until I realized I was just sweating because I have issues regulating my core body temperature. Anyway, you can imagine at our ages how excited we were to get back into the boots of retired Officer Leon Kennedy as he returns to Raccoon City for yet another massive zombie apocalypse. The last time we controlled him, it was a masterpiece, so you can imagine how great this next one could be. Well, so now the cat's dead, skinned, and dangling out of the fucking bag. What do you want me to say? That I love Resident Evil 6 just like I did back then? Well, too bad. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to get pissed off over a game that was made during my childhood that I didn't agree with. So, get over it. It's highly considered by many to be the worst in the series, definitely not the worst game ever made, but Jesus Christ, I refuse to believe the same team of talented men and women that worked hard on this game are also the ones who made Resident Evil 4, or even 5. There's just no possible universe where that's real. Resident Evil 6 is, how do I say this? Plagued with problems left and right, both narratively and mechanically. It's as if you paid someone to copy the formula of Resident Evil 5's gunplay and movement and make something cool of it, only they amplified the QTE button presses and over-the-top set pieces. Just look at the logo. What's that supposed to be? The number 6? It looks like a giraffe getting a blowjob. The narrative is probably going to be the biggest complaint I have with this shit heap, and I know I've played this game in the past with Brian at my side. The biggest marketing tool for the game itself was the fact that you had lots of different ways to play with your friends. It could be split screen, multiplayer, mercenaries matches, all that cool shit. There's also a total of 4 campaigns to play, with 3 being available right off rip, and the 4th one locked off until those ones are complete. Leon, Chris, and Jake? They all have respective campaigns and story missions that coordinate with the timeline of events as they unfold. This is a pretty huge cast of characters for one tiny game, so it's kind of a miracle that it works rather well. Throughout the story, the main characters will meet various times out of pure fucking coincidence and discuss the plot some more, but I really like seeing them all together, I can't lie. I also like the creative themes behind each campaign. Leon's select screen shows a bunch of zombie silhouettes, Chris's screen shows the Joavo gangsters, and Jake's screen shows the Houston X intimidating shadow. Gotta admit, They didn't have to be that creative with its design, but it works pretty well. What's wild to me is the cast of main characters. You gotta think, this is the last time we saw Leon and Chris together, not counting the movies. Fans had hoped this dynamic duo would show their faces in the 5th installment, but were heavily disappointed until the 6th game came out. In fact, Leon encounters quite a few old faces this time around. Well, I'll start off with my first impressions before I get into tearing the game limb from limb. Resident Evil 6 came as a surprise to my 13-year-old self, and I remember playing it religiously for weeks. I became obsessed with finding all the secrets, weapons, but mostly I was intrigued by the story. We had a buff, handsome, blonde guy raiding an entire village of corrupt, parasitic people. The next game had a handsome, buff, brown-haired lead character with an awesome sidekick and pretty cool storyline, so I can imagine this game was gonna blow me the fuck away. I am a little confused though. Why isn't Paul Mercier the voice of Leon in this installment? Instead, it's Matthew Mercer. He does a great job, don't get me wrong, but it felt really shitty that they didn't give a chance for the original voice actor to return. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Paul was probably the best voice actor for Leon, hands down. Again, Matthew Mercer isn't bad in the slightest, but I feel like his voice changed the entirety of Leon's character and personality on accident. In Resident Evil 2, he's a caring officer of the Force, and despite all that is thrown at him, he treats everyone he comes across with kindness and only wants to bring the madness to an end with as few casualties as possible. In the 4th game, he's definitely portrayed a lot more as a hardened, emo teenage fanfiction, but he's still determined to save Ashley from the trauma she endured and bringing an end to the Los Illuminados. Plus, he's got a lot of great fucking quotes. Here, Leon is such a dick, and he acts like he's John Wick or something. He's forced to be partners with Helena, who, in my opinion, was completely useless, but I'll burn that bridge later. And the two of them do more bickering than anything else. He's constantly complaining or quoting one-liners, but they're not nearly as powerful as the memorable ones. You know, bingo, no thanks bro. One could say he has undergone a lot of character development since then, but there's more to this game that pokes its ugly fucking head out from time to time. So let's move on. Leon's not even the worst part of the overall experience. When you get to the church with Helena, Leon doesn't even make an attempt to check on the survivors, which is totally out of his character. He wouldn't just defeat an army of infected only to turn around and tell the people he's protecting, hey, go fuck yourself, you're on your own, I'm not the rescue team. The background NPCs in this game, I swear, majority of them are nobodies, but it's the dialogue they managed to squeeze out of every single able-voiced employee working for Capcom, only to get them to say and do the dumbest shit.
Hello? I know someone's in there. Open up!
Are you crazy? Those things will kill us!
Look, it's just us. Hurry up and let us in.
Oh, shit, I will. I can hear them out there.
Are you... Sorry, guys. We're not rescue workers. The BSAA has arrived on the scene. Excuse me, can I get a comment, please? Excuse me, is this outbreak related to the situation back in the States? Is the BSAA involved there as well?
Look at this.
They try to make as many pointlessly unrealistic NPCs as they can. I suppose just to kill them off immediately afterwards for theatrics' sake. Another really time-consuming wasted mechanic are majority of the puzzle sections. Yeah, this game has puzzles, but only if you consider the most linear and drawn-out tedious bullshit on repeat as a potential brain teaser. Most of the puzzles in Resident Evil 6 are swimmingly easy, requiring the same IQ equivalent to that of a 4-year-old. Talk about fucking lame, man.
Pull up! This thing isn't gonna hold up much longer.
Just a few more blocks. Helena!
And What's this? Why is there always a convenient secondary path in every trap room? Why is there always a puzzle that requires 2 people to solve? Did the architects of this universe know that if someone would break into their glorified secret hiding hole, they certainly might bring a friend? That's another thing. You'll notice quickly how the game relies solely on the cooperation of your partner, who, by the way, can't help you for shit most of the time due to poor programming in the AI. Helena upsets me, which is disappointing because I feel like the actress was trying to give a great performance, but relatively had little to work with. The writing really does take you in all sorts of different and weird directions. But one thing at a time. So, why is everything designed to support 2 players? Well, that's because the plot calls for it. They really wanted this to be the next Call of Duty or something with how hyped up they were when designing the multiplayer aspects. Almost every single major moment in the game requires the help of your partner, and this can be frustrating for a multitude of reasons. Your partner's AI is about as good as I was when I had to hold the flashlight for my screaming father. They do whatever they can to avoid danger, even if it means letting you die. You're not the computer's priority, so why would they step in to help you when you need it most? Good fucking question. I'm getting a bit off the rails, but that's how this entire review is gonna feel. Resident Evil 6 isn't the worst game I've ever played, that's pretty self-explanatory, but when compared to the previous titles that kicked ass and made a name for the series in general, it's starting to look like a losing game. The plots within Resident Evil 6 are unique, with different characters going on different missions to progress the story and find out the truth behind what's going on. Much like the title hints, this is a web of connecting stories that intertwine like a bunch of Twizzlers. Leon is one of the most infamous characters right next to Chris, but what about Jake? When I first saw his name, I couldn't help but scratch my head. Who the fuck is Jake? Oh, right, he's just Albert Wesker's son, who possesses all the same power abilities as his father, but with nerfed melee combat. No big deal. Wait, you're telling me this is the son of one of the most influential, dangerous villains within the Resident Evil universe, and the guy doesn't even get a proper backstory? We're just thrown into this idea and told everything in the first mission?
Did you take your dose?
Yeah. If you want your own head, you gotta sign up with the lady downstairs. Wouldn't recommend it, though.
Sherry Birkin, the United States.
Yeah, good for you, but now's not really the time. You coming?
After you.
I want 200,000 up front, another 200 when this is over. I want BOWs. Those are extra. An additional grand each.
I'm not here to hire you.
What? Why are you here?
Your blood.
What, are you the Red Cross or something?
No, listen, those things that attacked us. They were all exposed to a new virus called the C virus. The same strain that you just took a dose of. It didn't affect you because you've got the antibodies.
Oh yeah, the writers loved their work here. They must have, considering how often they just dump the plot in your fucking face. When Leon and Helena are in the church catacombs, suddenly it becomes a family drama. Helena discovers that her very own flesh and blood sister is apparently a victim of the experiments that were going on, and she was last seen at the church, where she becomes this annoying fucking thing.
Deborah, stay with me, all right?
No, Deborah!
No, this can't be happening.
Helena, get away from her!
Stop! Don't shoot, please!
Why is Helena's sister important? Do you want the cold hard truth? She isn't. I have no idea why the team decided to go in such weird directions with the story and characters. I never really once found myself caring about anybody, with the exception of Leon, who has the best campaign in my opinion. I find it strange that they wanted so badly to introduce us to this all-star cast of clowns, but never again touched upon their stories. I don't remember the last time Helena, Derek Simmons, Jake, or even fucking Sherry have been brought up in the plots of the recent games. So I guess it's safe to say those characters are long gone now. The game will constantly try to drip bits of wet horror on your face, but you slowly realize it's just a boring stalagmite that you've been standing under for 40 minutes. There's actually a lot of slower, more drawn out segments in the campaigns that are supposed to serve as Resident Evil's calling card, being the whole survival horror label and all. The cemetery is a great example of how awful this can be. It doesn't matter if you're sprinting at top speed or gently walking. If you so much as nudge a hole in the ground with your big toe, you're falling right in. Usually you just have to climb back out. These are traps though, and if your health is low enough, you could just fucking die from a zombie you didn't know was down there. Like, look at this. I'm just walking through the cemetery looking for the way out. Oh, fuck. How did I slip? I was walking slowly and then... Wait, what? What the fuck is going on? I died? How the fuck did that happen? I had about 5 seconds to react, only you stole 4.5 away from me as a joke. The camera flipped all sorts of crazy ways and now I have to go back and do the whole thing over again. Oh yeah, how do you like the checkpoint system in this piece of filth? Trust me, it's not great. Whenever you die, you basically have to restart an entire segment. I accidentally got too close and personal with a zombie just outside of the church, and I died near the end of the enemy waves. When I came back, they placed me all the way at the start of the fight. Great.
I see it. Hurry.
The inventory mechanic is weird too. You don't necessarily have an item case like in RE4, but instead you're forced to keep an eye on how much ammo you're holding rather than saving bullets. This game gives you plenty of ammunition for your enemies, but that doesn't correlate with the rest of the series well. Resident Evil's claim to fame has always been its reliance on scarcity, the secrets, puzzles, and vague storytelling that haunts you while captivating you at the same time. The horrors that stretch beyond all human comprehension are what make this series so powerful. It should have never been bloated into this Battlefield fucking John Wick bullshit video game. Where the hell is the scary stuff? Where are the intense mutations? What happened to the slow movement of the zombies and the clunky tank controls? That's Resident Evil. This is just some teenagers' twisted fanfiction in the RE universe. Oh, don't worry. You fight plenty of mutated enemies, but... ugh. Remember how disappointing it was in Resident Evil 5 to get to the point of the game where the enemies are using guns? It felt like an open-palmed 5-star to the back with no warning, fighting enemies throughout the whole game that could only wield axes and knives, and now suddenly they have AK-47s and rockets? That's so fucking lame. Well, it's not so fucking lame to the devs because almost every single other enemy fires a weapon in this game, including some zombies. Later on though, it gets 10 times worse with almost every enemy firing a gun, even the ones that are mutated beyond recognition. Jesus Christ, I'm sorry, I should probably stay on track. I'll focus my attention on one campaign at a time, though I won't be covering them in full detail. I still have quite a few things to complain about, so sit back and get ready as we dive a little further into the worst that Resident Evil 6 has to offer. It's pretty obvious that everybody's first choice when launching the game up is to play as Leon, rightfully so. Not only is he a great character thanks to Resident Evil 2 and 4, he's also an expert in zombie apocalypses, which makes him the ideal protagonist to take control of. Helena was never introduced prior to this game's release, which leads me to believe the developers desperately tried to cobble together a partner that was just as interesting as Sheva, only they made her super generic and whiny.
Deborah, just hold on, we're almost there. Deborah, stay with me, alright? No, this can't be happening. No more tears. Not until I avenge your death. He's sterilizing the area.
And destroying the evidence.
How could he?
How you holding up?
Why didn't you turn me in? You could have cleared your name.
Maybe. But wouldn't have stopped Simmons.
I mentioned before that there's a random segment where Helena is shown in a flashback with her kidnapped sister Deborah, which was all part of a disgusting plan to tie up loose ends by one Derek Simmons. The boss fight with Deborah is just fucking weird though, and it does little to help us care about Helena's arc. By the way, just in the first few chapters of the first campaign, count how many times someone falls. You'll lose count around 13 or so. There's this weird thing that happens just to push the story forward where the ground beneath the main character characters just fucking breaks away and they take a fall to another sub-level. You can make a drinking game out of it. Take a shot when someone falls, you'll be fucking drunk in 10 minutes.
I'm holding something!
Leon, are you alright? Forgive me.
This is so dumb.
Gotcha, son of a bitch!
Like, here, look at this scripted nonsense. You're telling me this cemetery skeleton fuck is stronger than Leon Scott Kennedy? He gets pushed over the edge like a piece of paper getting caught in the path of a construction fan. And now we have to figure out the maze to get back to Helena. Fuck me. They really tried their best to take the best parts of Resident Evil 4, but they also brought the failures from that game and somehow made those worse as well. I'm not kidding. In Resident Evil 6, there is a fucking minecart segment, and it's made way worse than before. You have to fight Deborah while being suffocated between Ada and Helena. There's little you can do here to avoid damage, so I just shot the shit out of her until the fight was over. No strategy needed. Honestly, you probably don't need to fire a single round. Just lay on the ground and you'll be fine. In other games of the past, whenever a character dies, it was usually done in dramatic, cinematic fashion and shocked the player almost every time. Here's a throwback. Do you remember when Ben dies in the original Resident Evil 2 for PlayStation 1? That cutscene haunted me as a child, but it was the way that it built up, the pixelated struggling of the animations. It still creeps me out today, which means it's an effective and creative moment in one of the most timeless horror games I've played. Do you want to know how people die in Resident Evil 6? Watch this.
I'm gonna make him pay for this.
Keep in mind, we were literally just introduced to Deborah's character a few moments ago, and the main villain, Derek Simmons, is as weak and generic as they come. He was directly responsible for what happened to Helena and her sister, and he also somehow looks as villainous as a hungry crocodile stalking a pigeon stuck in the mud. It's pretty clear he's the main bad guy. They don't do much to hide that.
Well, you must be aware that you are both
suspects in this attack.
What?
Agent Harper,
At the time of the attack, you had abandoned your post.
leaving the president vulnerable.
You must admit such behavior is suspicious.
Son of a bitch! You're the one who planned all this!
With what evidence could you base such an outrageous accusation?
Gee, I don't know, maybe it's the outrageous way you talk. When you speak like this to everyone who is beneath you. Since he's also the head of national security, he flat out convicts Leon and Helena of killing the president even though he was infected, marking them as wanted fugitives. A big plot point that never comes back, by the way. It's not like Leon and Helena ever suffer for being wanted fugitives at all. So it's up to them to clear their names and kill everything that moves, basically. The next few chapters involve going to China, which is where the game starts to fall apart for me. Mostly because it tries too hard to end things rapidly rather than build up for a satisfying conclusion. So the plane that Leon and Helena are on crashes, but they survive. It all comes down to meeting Sherry and Jake, who are being pursued by that giant estranged creature during the course of their campaign. After helping them, you realize that Sherry was about to meet with Simmons to get some answers, only to be greeted by gunfire and betrayal. These cutscenes though, man, they're so weird. Nobody acts like a real human being in most of them.
in a minute.
I need you to rescue 2 hostages from an underwater oil field.
The guerrillas are using a new species of BOW. Command is calling them Juavo. They are extremely intelligent, incredibly strong, and have the ability to mutate in response to physical trauma.
Leon, wait. There's something I need to tell you. Ada Wong is dead.
Copy.
I should also mention the callback to the regenerators from the 4th game. Once in China, you'll have to fight them off left and right when playing as Leon. They're not as intense or scary as their counterparts though. In fact, these creatures are just kind of pathetic. You can debilitate them with a basic weapon so long as you concentrate your fire on their limbs and shit. Anyway, let's get back to the plot. While his guard is down, Simmons is shot by some strange serum. As the player, we can infer that it only spells trouble. So then it comes down to a final showdown on the train tracks. Fuck it. Would it even be a Resident Evil game without a train fight segment? You'll have to take Simmons down, but watch out, he's turned into a giant, pit bull with a turkey's neck, I guess. All you have to do is shoot him until the next cutscene plays, and this goes on for way too long. You can't properly invest yourself in the story because the gameplay is always being interrupted by these garbage cinematics. It would have been so much more thrilling if it were more like RE5 with its freedom and wide open areas for bosses. But since this game is super linear, the big fights feel rushed because there's no legitimate skill. Just fucking mag dump Simmons and eventually he dies. He gets smushed by the fucking subway train after having a meltdown. But if you know Resident Evil, you know he's not actually dead yet. No, first you'll have to fight 5 different variations of the fucking guy. I'm not kidding either. Derek's boss fight stretches for an unnecessary amount of time. He has like 4 definitive deaths and 4 massive infection stages you have to take on before the game is over. It's just more padding for fucking time. They really didn't want to end the game on a boring note. Sadly though, I am bored. The entire game is full of action set pieces like this, but aren't all that satisfying, at least not when the main villain is this predictable. It's like Nemesis from the RE3 remake. He just constantly comes back without doing anything interesting or new. It's a waste of fucking storytelling. Anyway, after fighting all 18 of his fucking mutation stages, Derek Simmons finally falls to his death, and the game is over. Leon escapes the city with Helena at his side, and the two of them ride off into the distance. I'll admit, Leon's campaign, although severely flawed, is the most fun. You get a pretty good blast from the past by killing the normal slow-moving zombies, utilizing some melee combat mechanics to conserve ammunition, and the environments that Leon has to go through are lore-friendly with decrepit labs, a cemetery maze, and overall an easier vibe. I like playing as Leon the most because his campaign feels very impactful. Almost like the devs knew that fans of RE4 would choose him in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, if you're a mega fan of RE6, this is where you're gonna start hating me. The rest of the game is such a dramatic, boring, and convoluted mess that I don't think I could even do it justice. It's not the worst game in the world, like I've said, but holy shit, it is by far the worst Resident Evil game, so let's just fucking keep going. I said I won't be going into deep dives of each campaign, and I mean it. But I do want to talk about them all because they suffer from similar handicaps that repeat as you play them. Chris has a pretty interesting start to his campaign. He's discovered to be a drunken shell of who he once was long after the events of RE5. Hiding away in some unknown bar, a BSAA soldier named Piers introduces himself to the PTSD-ridden war hero. He's convinced pretty easily enough to come back and work for the BSAA under the guise that they will save the world and stop the bioterrorist menace. I liked the potential behind this particular campaign, but it's nothing like Leon's at all. The tension that they tried to build up in the first storyline is completely absent, as majority of the Chris chapters are non-stop action and fighting. Since when did Resident Evil become a fucking firefight simulator? The Juavo enemies are so uninteresting that they make me physically upset. They don't have strategies or tactics other than aiming and shooting. Some of them will charge you with a melee weapon, but they're pretty fucking easy to take down. When the Juavo begin to mutate, their tactics will slightly switch up on you, but they're still firing guns with fucking bullets in a Resident Evil game. I suppose the only thing goofier than that would be to include a segment where you're fighting the same boss gauntlet over and over again. Me and my fat fucking mouth. This is the level where Sherry and Jake assist Chris's team with clearing the area and killing big bastards with slimy tentacles popping out of their backs. Are you noticing a theme here? In Leon's campaign, they would introduce a new mutation for the player to treat as an obstacle, but they'll overdo it and force you to commit to these long, repetitive firefights until the game just decides that it's over. In Chris's campaign, you have to kill a total of 3 giant fucking trolls before the mission is over, and that's just unapologetically tedious. If you thought that was bad, oh boy, the entirety of Chris's campaign is a repetitive joke. You're fighting Juavo constantly just to progress to the next major segment of the game. There's not really a large number of iconic moments in this one either. There are a couple of underwhelming mini-boss fights, like this helicopter that you have to blow up, or those turtle-shelled fuckheads that charge after you and absorb a lot of damage. Remember when I said they tried really hard to stuff this turkey full of shit to the point where it's overwhelming? I wasn't kidding. It becomes apparent in Chris's campaign with the amount of generic action game stuff they jam-packed into it. There's a jet segment with awful controls that force you to take down one of the hostile Juavo ships. There's a floaty turret segment that's even more unbearable and boring than the 5th game. It's just a mess through and through. This doesn't feel like Resident Evil anymore. I feel like I'm just playing Leon's campaign, but with a reskin. Eventually, Chris and Piers do end up getting to the underwater oil rig in order to save Jake and Sherry. This is where Chris finds out that Jake is Albert Wesker's child and that he has the cure for the C antibodies. We get a really weird scene between the two of them as Chris finally confronts his past.
I can see your father in you.
How did you know?
Wait, hold on a second.
So you knew him? Yeah, I did. But I'm the one that killed him.
I don't even understand. Jake doesn't really know his father that well. And the little he does know, it's not good. Why would he suddenly care that the man who stopped Wesker tells him the truth? In fact, in Jake's campaign, he does not care at all who his father is until he gets kidnapped in Adonia with Sherry. He's told all this negative information about his father, all the fucked up things he did over the course of the games, and suddenly he gets upset about it, claiming he isn't surprised as to why he has led such a bad life? I don't see why that shit matters now other than to throw old characters into the mix once again. This part is followed by some of the worst platforming ever. The giant final boss cocoon hatches, forcing Chris and Sherry to fight against, I don't know, this thing that looks like a malnourished, handsome Squidward.
Let go of the pizza!
It's a pain in the fucking balls. The camera is fixed at a specific angle and all you can do is run. There's little room to fuck up on any difficulty, and if you do, you go all the way back to the start of the fucking thing. Jesus Christ, I cannot tell you how many times I struggled to kill the last boss for Chris, especially with little to no ammunition. What happens is, Piers gets fatally wounded as Chris is taken by the creature. Piers also has a sample of the virus that he extracted from Ada's suitcase earlier on, and decides to inject himself with it. Using the power behind the infection at his disposal, Piers becomes an irreversibly strong force to be reckoned with. Unfortunately, the power doesn't last. Once you kill the final boss for good, we get possibly the only emotional scene in the entire fucking experience. Piers sacrifices himself to save Chris.
Piers! No, don't do this!
Open the door!
God damn it! Listen to me! We can still both get out of here! There's still time! What are you doing? No, Piers, don't! You can still make it out!
It's a really dark and emotional moment. Over the course of the game, Chris has had to say goodbye to every single one of his men in the BSAA, and now that... Oh my god, what the fuck? That thing is still alive? I get it, right? It's basically common sense to incorporate a mutated enemy in these games that comes back over and over, but this is so fucking stupid. Why can't they ever just decide when enough is enough? Did they really need to include this unnecessary moment where the monster is definitively killed by Piers? Anyway, that's Chris's campaign finished. Like I said, there isn't much I want to dive into personally besides the obsession he has with killing the Juavo and bringing his wrath to all BOWs. Sadly though, it didn't feel at all like a new experience or anything. It's very similar to the first campaign with some slight changes. I liked the chemistry Chris has with Piers, but it's not enough to warrant a true bond like with Sheva from RE5. You're essentially playing quarters of the full story without any of the important character arcs. I'll be honest, I found it extremely hard to care about this lineup. Nobody stands out as they once did in the past. It's very much a copy and paste job between each campaign, besides the set pieces. No sense in droning on. It's time to get into the pants of Wesker Jr. and destroy the Juavo. Mind you, this one is probably one of the most annoying. You'd think that being the son of one of the most powerful villains in the Resident Evil franchise, Jake Mueller would be more than just a mercenary for hire. I went into Jake's campaign expecting to have all sorts of cool shit like powers or something. In the opening cutscene, it's demonstrated that he's a pretty powerful human being and is no stranger to violence. But, big fucking shock, Jake gets the exact same combo moves as everyone else. Sure, he has different animations and much nicer special takedowns, but it's done at the exact same pace as the others. Disappointing considering his actual father was able to fucking dodge bullets, teleport, jump really high, and most important, he kicked some fucking ass. Jake is nothing like Wesker. When you play as him, you might as well be playing as a guy version of Sherry. Jake's quips and jokes are non-stop as well. Every few cutscene or seconds or whatever, he has to say something really quirky.
Between me and you, I think we should ask for more money. A lot more. Pretty sure this wasn't part of the contract. But I am willing to renegotiate. Eat this.
Hope you haven't forgotten about my $50 million.
Talk to my boss!
What's wrong, asshole? Losing your nerve?
By the way, that's Troy Baker doing his voice too. Troy is usually a great addition to most games, and I'd like to think this was one of his earlier roles, but why did they write Jake as some sort of cringe emo teenager from Hot Topic? Not really getting the whole tough guy mercenary vibes from him. We also have Sherry, who we all know from both the original and RE2 remake. She's Sherry. There's not much to go on for her character besides the fact that she can heal any sort of damage no matter how bad thanks to the infection she suffered from as a child. The rest of the game, she just tries to be Rebecca Chambers with all of this bullshit drivel about, I'm not weak, I'm a strong independent person with feelings. And it's like, yeah, Sherry, we knew that. You don't have to focus so much on it, just do it. They form an unlikely bond as Sherry basically dumps all of the lore onto us during the gameplay. Whenever something happens, Sherry has a massive explanation for it, which is awful convenient and dumb. And it's much of the same idea. Just like Chris, Jake's campaign is full of non-stop action. You'll constantly fight the Juavo until you get to a point where you're suffering from sensory deprivation. Reviewing this game so far has felt like playing the exact same fucking levels on repeat, but with very small changes. It's absolutely unforgivably mundane. There are a couple of good moments, like when you meet the Eustanek for the first time. It's a giant creature created by Neo Umbrella to kill Jake and ruin the chance of getting a possible vaccine from his blood. That is the plot, by the way. Everyone wants to suck off Jake and use his blood for good or evil because he just so happens to be a host for the perfect antibodies that will end the virus for good. As if it couldn't get any more cliche, now we have a cure plot. Again. Eustanek also becomes the Mr. X of this campaign. He comes back every time, all the time. You should just expect it at this point. He even comes back to destroy the chopper after Sherry and Jake assist Chris with the trolls in the city. Evidently, the plane crashes and Sherry reveals her secretive powers to Jake. Don't worry, she still dies if she loses too much health, so there's that. Of course she can. That's just kind of the way the game works. Well, the only scary part about Jake's campaign is when you're forced to go into these crystal mines where you find our two heroes trapped with the indestructible beast. You have to play it stealthy here by avoiding his weird monitoring bugs and getting out safely. This part is also tedious though, because you have to take the bugs out one by one. You can't just run around all willy-nilly. Not unless you want to die quickly. It's a very short segment and ends with Jake and Sherry being kidnapped anyways, so what the fuck. We fast forward 6 months later and suddenly Jake is transported into the same place where they made Super Hot. You escape with Sherry only to find that you're in China where a majority of the game takes place. It's about fucking time. Except it's even worse than Chris's campaign. You eventually get attacked by a giant fucking tank, only to escape on a motorcycle with possibly the worst bike physics I've ever seen. Your turns feel so stiff and the camera is locked forever on the path ahead, so there's no possible way to try and evade the enemies here. Just keep fucking driving and try not to tear your hair out. I shit you not, they even somehow found a dumb fucking excuse to bring back an old enemy. Yeah, wanna know which familiar favorite they went with? Well, let me ask you this. What has every Resident Evil game had in it since the release of the 4th one? If your guess was a terrible Dr. Salvador clone, you are absolutely fucking right. What is this? A fucking meat saw? How does this even happen in the messed up world of biology that this game barely explores? It's just another pathetic attempt to get you to like it, or maybe point your finger at it and say, oh look, that's familiar. He's not intimidating, he's not scary, and he's not strong. Moving on. Sherry is desperately trying to get Jake to safety where his blood will be used as a cure rather than a weapon. In order to do that, she has to meet with her advisor to discuss further details. Who is her advisor, you may ask? Why, it's none other than Derek fucking Simmons, the evil bad guy. Gee, who would have seen that coming? Thankfully, after reuniting with Leon and Helena, Sherry is warned about Simmons and his bad guy behavior. Moments later, her and Jake walk in on the meeting where shit goes awry. Jake and Sherry are captured and placed in the underwater facility where Chris frees them. You fight a fucking ton of regenerators here, only to then be greeted by the Ustinek once again. This is the final showdown, and I'm not gonna lie, it's probably the coolest part of Jake's campaign. You get a pretty decent segment where you have to fist fight the fucking behemoth. I like when Jake punches the creature in the fucking mouth. That's some 90s action movie shit right there. But it's not over. Jake and Sherry find a warehouse lift only to be attacked one more time by Ustinek. This is a dumb moment in the game because it's all QTE, there's no control given to the player at all. Why didn't they just end the game when the monster fell into the lava? Seemed like a pretty definitive death to me. It reminds me of the RE3 remake again, and how many times Nemesis gets fucked up, only to come back stronger than ever. I know I made that point earlier, but it's just crazy how history repeats itself. I don't care though, because it's finally over. Sherry and Jake escape, eventually saving the world and going their separate ways. And that's the end of that. Guys, I'm so exhausted. But I can't give up because there's only one more left to drag myself through. We never got the explanation of why the fuck Ada appears in everyone's campaign, so what's the sitch? I'll let Derek Simmons inform you.
Jake Mueller has been located in the Republic of Edonia. Your mission is to find out if his body has antibodies to the C virus. We cannot allow a vaccine to be produced.
There you go. That's pretty much Ada's campaign. I'm not kidding either. Ada's boring ass just plays through the same major segments with little to any variation. She gets her own arsenal of complementary weaponry, which is really neat, but I'm afraid this one suffers the same fate as the RE4 Remake's DLC. It's too boring. Ada Wong is supposed to be this super secret being. Sure, everyone knows who she is in the universe of the main characters, or has at least heard of her, but the point is that she's supposed to be a shadow type of person, someone who isn't a part of someone else's game. She's supposed to be a badass who doesn't take orders from strangers. But here she just goes along with everything all willy-nilly and it confuses the shit out of me. She doesn't stand to get anything by helping Simmons. I mean, she knows he's a bad guy, why the fuck would she even entertain this? She doesn't fight anyone different either, it's all the same scumbuckets we're used to. It's just 20 times more frustrating because all of the campaigns have felt exactly like this. The further you go on, the more you realize that it's a downward slope. You'll play Leon's campaign and have some fun, especially with the goofy dialogue, but the rest of them are like being trapped in a mud pit and trying to claw your way out with your feet while your ankles are fucking tied to a cement brick. Actually, there is one major part of Ada's campaign that feels different than the rest of it. She confronts her evil twin that Simmons had created using his own wife as a host, and it ends with Ada being chased through a wrecked ship as her once doppelganger tries to fuck her up. I really like this small moment, but it's so short-lived and linear anyways, it really doesn't matter. It's a really boring title overall, and now that all of the campaigns have been completed, I gotta say, I'm burnt. Resident Evil 6 is a fucking awful game. I even think it's worse than Resident Evil Dead Aim and Resident Evil Survivor. At least those games had one or two characters, had a consistent plot, and tried to introduce some new people to the series that weren't written by 12-year-olds. It's got a couple of good Resident Evil things in it, like the files and the figurines, I suppose. It says there's files, right? But you can't, like, pick this shit up. Oh. I guess I got a figurine of Derek Clifford Simmons. I didn't know that was his middle name. I didn't know that.
My job to prevent terrorist attacks, not cause them.
Sure. Okay, neat. I'm so happy that I collected that. The characters are there, but they feel like alternate dimension versions of themselves. Like, somebody saw them in the past and freaked out because they weren't edgy or cool enough. Resident Evil doesn't need edge or coolness. It needs the fundamental fucking things it had in the past, and it needs them done well. The graphics are still pretty nice after all this time, I guess, so that's another plus. The weapons and ammo are cool and plentiful, but that's not exactly a compliment. It doesn't serve to make the experience feel vital, and I think the ultimate reason why it failed is because it was nothing like its predecessors. Not even RE5 fucked up this bad, and that game is a significant step down from RE4. So that's it. I've done what nobody in their right mind would want to. I've played through every single campaign of this trash heap, and in my opinion, that's good enough. If you're feeling curious and want to try it out for yourself, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but do me one favor. Try your hardest not to fall asleep after just the first 2 campaigns. You'll be in La La Land before the fucking Eustanex shows up. Hopefully, we don't see any other Resident Evil games like this one, because they couldn't have missed the mark further than they did. This shit just doesn't do it, and I'm sad at one point I paid $60 to play it. Ridiculous. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this very long and elaborate video. Obviously, I worked pretty hard on it, so it would mean a lot if you left a comment telling me your opinion on the series as a whole. I love engaging with you guys, and hearing what you have to say will always be fun. Regardless, I'm happy you decided to watch all the way to the end. I hope you all have fantastic days. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.